All right, it's Mondays with Marcuse.
Mondays with Marcuse. Marxist Monday here in the
It's Marxist Monday, right? We have Freaky Friday, Marxist Monday.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good, right? Not a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist.
I'm not a Marxist. Yeah, but that would be great
but,
if we, as a regular thing on the Philosophy of the People channel, had Marxist Monday.
Right. Yeah.
It would keep us very honest, right?
If you guys are into it, we'll maybe make this a regular feature. I don't know, man.
If we did like all the volumes of Das Kapital, it's like 1,200 pages. So here we are, like episode 79 of Das Kapital.
Talk about reading the damn book. I have to admit, I've never read Capital. I've never done it. The manifesto is easy.
I've not read all the volumes.
I've not read Capital. I just haven't.
I read. I forget which of the volumes you're like supposed to read. There's like, one, you should read the books, but a lot of it is just, Marx's attempts at empirical economics too,
and which is just, we know, terrible, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Marxist Monday. We are reading the neo-Marxist Marcuse, who himself was, as we said last time, highly critical of much of Marxist theory. Said it wasn't sufficiently empirically based. Didn't care enough about the individual. And now we're on to chapter 3. We'll let Jim do the summary, but chapter 3 is when I started probably having at least a number of not like negative reactions as I was positive. You know what I mean? Like, so the first couple of chapters, there's actually a fair amount that people who would otherwise broadly disagree with Marcuse, as we've seen, we can be on board with these critiques.
Yeah.
Chapter 3, we start getting some Freudian sexual stuff. We start to see his Freudian sexual theory coming in.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to spoil it. We'll get into it, Jim. So why don't you take a lead?
Yeah, no. So those first couple of chapters, I just think if you have the slightest bit of just punk rock in you, right? You're like, yeah, the man is keeping me down, right? If you just
I grew up with the band that's now called Rage with the Machine, apparently.
Exactly. Yeah, if you grew up like me, listening to The Business, right? Like you there's something about those first chapters that they're hitting you, and once again, we both were there, like found it kind of hard to find a whole lot to disagree with in those two chapters, right? And they're frenemy chapters, and emphasizing the friend right now, maybe more enemy, but I do think there's a lot positive to be taken away from chapter 3 too. Okay.
Oh, definitely. Right.
Definitely. So let's go to the title, right? So it's the conquest of the unhappy consciousness, repressive desublimination. Okay.
Sounds like a journal article if there ever was one.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Now in that title evokes another essay that Marcuse is infamous for, is his essay on repressive tolerance. Okay. And note the irony in it, like repressive desublimination is meant to be ironic in the same sense that the title repressive tolerance was meant to be ironic. Okay.
Yeah.
And this notion of repressive tolerance is where a lot of the anti-free speech stuff that's going on in university today, stems. Well, you can't draw a causal line from one guy's essay to a culture, right? But it's an expression of that tendency.
Right. But it's definitely right to say, like, he is one of the fundamental thinkers, right, within this paradigm, right?
This is the first gospel of woke.
Right. So it's not just a happy accident, right? Yeah. It's not.
And so, and once that's kind of what we're doing.
Unhappy accident. Excuse me.
Unhappy accident, as it were. Yeah. Infelicitous. and so repressive tolerance was where, he made that the modern emphasis on tolerance and free speech in the university, as he's finding it in the early 1960s, was a mask for a deeper repression. It was a tolerance that had been channeled and filtered through, pre-selection by, the machine for the purposes of the machine. Right. So that it tolerated free speech within a certain range, all of the options of which, though different, were tolerable to the system. Okay.
One of the themes of Marcuse is that the machine, to him, is like the ultimate jiu-jitsu player or judo player, right? It can just take whatever you throw at it and immediately reverse it back on you, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like Hapkido, one of those like
but
slippery martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Right. There's the machine doesn't pressure pass, man.
No, it doesn't. Right? Because it's so utterly subtle and elegant and brilliant. That's why so many people miss it. This is a big theme with him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting. This would be like an interesting deconstruction to do. Is like the machine is sort of omniscient, right? It's omnipotent, right? It's sort of it's starting to sound like it's been deified, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and so the desublimation is a reference here to Freud. It's a implicit reference to Freud, and desublimation had in the by the time you get to the 1950s, early 1960s, had become this watchword for a kind of sexual liberation that people were calling for based on Freud's notion of repressed neurosis as a product of repressed sexual desire.
That's right. Okay? Right. Mm-hmm.
And so this is the thing about this chapter, which is what Marcuse is doing here is like what people are calling desublimation of the sex drive in order to like liberate it and get over these neuroses is in fact really just a further repression of it.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, the machine took it in and used it against you.
Use it again. Yeah. Okay. And that's an interesting thing. Okay. And because we're going to see him in a lot of ways turn the sexualized pop culture against itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And seeing it as it is just a deeper, it's a veil of the deeper power move that's being made here. Okay. And once again, I'm happy to agree with much of what he has to say there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where I think we're getting apart from is like what it would be like to get over this, right?
Okay. Right. And we could obviously quibble about Freud's theory as I think the majority of psychologists these days do. Now, psychology, as you know, is replete with these issues of replication in general and stuff like that. So, I mean, how much we should allow psychology or modern, I guess the sort of modern empirical consensus on psychological issues like deeply inform our philosophical anthropology is itself a really important question, right? But a question for another time.
And also there's a legitimate question in this area here is was Freud shown to be wrong, or did psychology as a discipline decide it would rather just do something else? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was Freud should have been wrong, or did psychology decide to define itself by a certain notion of what it meant to be scientific, and then thereby go down this neurophysiological pathway rather than this sort of like, the notion of the subconscious,
the clearly softer pathway, right? That is probably around this time. I mean, probably around this time, most people would still have thought of psychology as a pseudoscience, right? I forget when it elevated itself and proceed. I mean, like, look, many scientists still want to call it a pseudoscience, right? Because it doesn't meet certain criteria that people want to say need to be there for something to be rigorously scientific.
Replicating experiments is a big thing, right?
Right, quantification, all this sort of stuff, right?
And so, and keep in mind, like what we talked about earlier, stuff with Marcuse, where he says that move to a so-called scientific psychology is itself playing into the hands of the machine, because it's operationalizing everything, seeing everything as just in terms of how it can be manipulated physically for the purposes of market and all that, right? So, interestingly, Marcuse would, for reasons that I think we would agree with him on, not like that turn of psychology away from this sort of more humanistic, humanities-based kind of understanding to a narrowly scientifically empirical understanding. So one more thing about the title too is, so the conquest of the unhappy consciousness, repressive desublimation. Okay. The unhappy consciousness is...
We should just get that on a t-shirt.
That's right.
Drink a coffee mug with that on there.
Yeah. And then on the back, it would say, because you could wear this to the rallies now, and it would say, I actually read the book, son.
Right. Yeah, that'd be good.
Right.
Feed Pat and Jim. Pre-order now. Sorry, I won't do obnoxious interruptions anymore.
No, I'm all for that, man. This is our way of things. Right? Hey, if you don't want that, there's other sources of philosophy on the internet.
Indeed there are.
Right.
Continue, sir. Yeah.
And so the conquest of the unhappy consciousness, that's a reference to Hegel. Okay, so one of the characters in the phenomenology of spirit there's all these unnamed characters in the phenomenology of spirit. One of the stages of consciousness that goes through for Hegel is this unhappy consciousness. And basically the unhappy consciousness, a lot of people think he's talking about kind of an extreme Augustinian view, like a very ascetic version of Christianity that's denying ultimately sexuality as a good.
Yeah.
Okay. And what Marcuse is saying here is what's going as de-sublimation today in the popular culture is not the overcoming of the unhappy prudish Augustinianism. It is the final victory of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then also, as you know, he also takes up the whole notion of the role of art in the civilization and stuff like that. Okay.
And
But since we're
and its relation to alienation, right?
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're on the sex thing now. So let's circle back to the broader views about the arts. Okay. Mm-hmm. But actually that's low hanging fruit. So let's do that first. So what's he say again and again is like we have lost the distinction between the commercial and the actual artistic content that we're going to the movie, say, to see, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think the best example to see that is, 1980s Steven Spielberg movies were clearly like the scripts were written in part for the purpose of product placement, right? Like they put everything in the American suburb, right, in the ranch home, with the conveniently
placed including the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park 2 was literally in the suburb, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like everything is put into that package thing, and so much of it is product placement, right? Like we're going to have certain kinds of cars in the films because we want, Chevy is paying us to do this. We're going to have, gee, time for a drink. Here's my Coke, right? I mean, and like the very line between the content of the art or the music, whatever we're consuming, and the sponsor of it, right? The merch that's being pushed has been completely blurred, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Everything's become brand image. Like you cannot, like, just the irony that you've got, like, say, by the 1970s, you got the Rolling Stones touring sponsored by Bud, right?
Right.
I mean, you have like supposedly this sort of rebellious form of art, right? Mm-hmm. Like rock and roll has just been incorporated into selling product.
The Machine, right? Yeah. So Marcuse would never have been a fan of Rage Against the Machine, right?
No, he would not.
He may have liked Chumbawamba before they sold out, right? Yes. Chumbawamba is a really funny band, right? Because they were like, hardcore, hardcore alienation, but then they got a whole bunch of flack from that alienated artistic community when they signed their first record deal. Because why? The revolution will not be televised.
Will not be televised. It won't be. If it's on TV, it's not the revolution, right?
That's right. And they started going on TV. So
exactly. Mm-hmm. Or there's a line in here where he talks about this is like the Adler great book phase is going on now. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a popular thing for a while, not just Adler, but other people. Like,
in fact, I highlighted that. Can I read it? This is one you're thinking of. I thought this was a paragraph that I thought was like, I both like agree and disagree, but maybe more agree. He says the neoconservative critics of leftist critics of mass culture ridicule the protest against Bach as background music in the kitchen, against Plato and Hegel, Shelley and Baudelaire, Marx and Freud in the drugstore. Instead, they insist on the recognition of the fact that the classics have left the mausoleum and come to life again, that people are just so much more educated. True, but coming to life as classics, they come to life as other than themselves. They are deprived of their antagonistic force, of the estrangement, which is the very dimension of their truth. The intent and function of these works has thus fundamentally changed. If they once stood in contradiction to the status quo, this contradiction is now flattened out. Yeah, that's there's elements of that are hard to argue with. I don't know what Bach in the kitchen necessarily has to do with it, but like the incorporation of Plato and Aristotle.
Like Bach originally was a quasi-sacramental act.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Like this was done as, and one, it was transgressive to the musical culture of the time. Right. It was rebellious in a way, and this was done as a quasi-sacramental act. And now, hey, I'm like cleaning up my garbage disposal, and to make that more pleasant to me, I put Bach on the background. Like there is a kind of defaning of something profound here going on, right?
And this is what I was like, it is annoying when you see these headlines about it's time to get rid of Aristotle or something like that, right? Like that is annoying. So I'm gonna admit that. But at the same time, like it's clear that he is often fundamentally co-opted and hijacked and misrepresented. Yeah. But let's be fair. It's not like it's a bunch of like right. I mean, the greatest misrepresentation I ever got in school was like the feminist interpretation of Nietzsche type of crap,
Oh, God,
right?
yeah.
So, you know, this is
a
something
feminist interpretation of Nietzsche is a failure to read Nietzsche.
right. Of course
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
I won't start quoting now because I'd like to keep the channel on.
But anyways, I'm glad you brought that because I highlighted that.
So
because
here's what I think is going on in that passage. So they take Plato's Republic, because we've done this on the channel before. Plato's Republic is an inherently destabilizing, transgressive text to where I don't care where you're what political situation you're reading it in. It is a destabilizing text, right? It really is in many ways. And just think of it. So now the idea that, in his time, if only the Republic were available in paperback form at the drugstore today, right? Okay. But, in his time, you walk into the CVS and there's like a cheap paperback copy of the Republic you can, pay your money for and get. Okay. And so now the Republic, rather than being a quasi sacramental experience, right, has been reduced to just like something that we buy and sell in an exchange, right? And why is someone really buying the Republic? Well, because they want to read and understand it, maybe, or is it just, a brand image?
They want to have it on their bookshelf.
When
they do podcasts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Don't we all?
You know what I mean? Don't we all, right? Or, it's this idea, just think of the idea of Marx's Communist Manifesto being sold at CVS for a cut rate price. It's incredibly ironic. It's utterly ironic, right? And I think Marcuse would say that it's so ironic. It strains credulity to say it's accidental, right? That what we have is we've taken these classics that were supposed to draw us out of the cave, and we've just incorporated them.
The cave drew them in. That's what
drew them in. Yeah, drew them in. Yeah. And now the thing is like, what's the answer? Well, do we just quit educating people? Well, that's kind of what Marcuse wants. Well, then if no matter what, it's going to be sucked in the machine, just destroy everything. And then, we'll start over in a commune. Right.
And he is sort of in tension here, because on one part he wants to do that, but another part he's also pushing back against the very strong anti-intellectual stream of leftism at the time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think he understands that balance, right?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe he doesn't succeed in the balancing act ultimately, but he's in this tense position where there is a very strong anti-intellectualism on the left at the time. And he's trying to disassociate from that, but at the same time, he kind of wants to blow the entire system up, right?
He wants to blow the system up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like the solution to the commercialization of education is not to quit educating, right? Like that's the problem with this guy, right? Like, we could admit that there does seem to be something profaning about buying and selling Bach and Plato, right? But that doesn't mean we then just say, just like utterly just destabilize education at all, and just say, well, we're going to like go back to like a state of nature never happened, right? And think that we're going to work it out better.
Have sex in a meadow, which he's fond of.
Yeah. Okay. That's now let's go to that. Right.
Let's go to sex in the meadow. Right.
Let's go to the good part. Let's go to the dirty parts. Okay. So what is popular arts, popular education? Marcuse is saying it's just taking what was dangerous and packaging it in a very palatable and reproducible way, so that you can have the illusion of liberation, but not the real thing. Okay. Right. And so now he's writing this the early 60s, so we've gone through the 50s, right? And there's this whole movement of people who are saying, no, like we need like the repressed housewife to be reading dirty novels about like randy housewives behaving run amok while Ward's at work, right? Okay. Right. I mean, okay. Right. We need we need
Ward's the perfect.
Exactly, right. Like while Ward Cleaver's at work, right? We need Playboy and Cosmopolitan, right? I mean, because these are the idea that they're going to get all these repressed sexual desires out in the open, and we'll get over our neuroses, and we'll be nicer to our kids and all this, and then maybe rich people should be experimenting with key parties and all this. All starting now. It's all starting here.
Next T-shirt. While Ward's at work, philosophy for the people.
Exactly. Yeah. What your wife's up to when Ward's at work? What was Mrs. Cleaver's first name?
I don't know.
Gentle listeners, please come in with it. Right? Yeah.
Bear with us. By the way, we're going to do Q&A at the end. I already see some good questions and comments. Yeah. So drop whatever you have for us here.
And the idea is that we're gonna and so what Marcuse sees in this is not the ultimate liberation of sexuality. It's the commercialization of sexuality, right? You're buying your desublimation at, I don't know what a Playboy cost you in 1962, right? Okay, but like, okay, you're buying your desublimation at, you know, $1.50 a copy now, right? And he points out again and again throughout this chapter, like, well, it's always like really rich, good-looking people in the novels who are, you know, and the novel's always got like Fabio on the cover with some, you know, rich, good-looking woman, and they're gonna have like ooey tingly, beautiful sex in their fabulous, you know, getaway in, you know, Rio de Janeiro, something like that. And so it's always still filtered through a kind of glamorization of sexuality that's ultimately about like selling stuff, that's selling an image of success and all that, right? Okay. And he has one, I'll read at length, but, you know, he says, like, you know, we talk about sexual liberation among like neatly packaged, you know, young men in their like power suits and young women in their sexy office outfits, right? And yeah, you've sexualized the office place, but that's not liberation. That's just repackaging in a way that gets you to buy clothes. Right.
It's processed. It's packaged.
It's processed and it's packaged. Okay. Now, and this is where I'm funny. We found that same passage, right? So for him, sexual liberation isn't 50 Shades of Grey, right? I mean, because like 50 Shades of Grey, I'm told I've read it, but
I have not read that damn book.
Yeah, exactly. Don't. Okay. I mean, because what it is, I'm sure everybody in the book is like really good looking, right? And they're like successful professionals, and they're having their like sexual liberation, you know, on the leather couch, you know, with their Lamborghini parked in the parking lot. So it's all product placement anyway, right? No, for Marcuse, sexual liberation is Woodstock.
Right.
It's like, you know, pale, ugly hippies having sex in the mud. Right. It's like, it's not packaged. It's not, it's just completely destabilized.
Right. From afar, you think you're looking at a barn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because he mentions, no, like I'm talking about medievals, you know, sneaking away to have some creepy orgy in a muddy meadow somewhere. That's desublimation, right? That's releasing the sexual desire from any outside influence whatsoever. Right. Okay. And so I think I can go a long way with him and to say, I don't know, all the way with him, say what's called sexual liberation today is not. It is just it's packaging of something, right?
Yeah, I mean, spot on, of course,
on.
right? I mean, like it's not only repackaging of anything, but it is of course a deeper enslavement, not just to the machine, but to just to vice in general, right?
Yeah.
Now, whether he's going to think about the human person and you know virtue ethics is a different story, but certainly we can take what he says and apply it to that context, I think, very easily. Right.
But note that, like the deep rebellion against nature that's being claimed here as like a liberation of nature, right? Because there's no mention of the sex act as associated with procreation.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, it's mentioned that like a need to control birth control he likes this as a means of sexual liberation, because if you're really going to get the hippies to get down in the mud, right, that, you know, the baby thing is going to be a drag on that, right? So I mean, I would say like he's just as much a techno nihilist as like the corporate guys in their nice suits who want to like essentially have sex with plastic women, right?
That's right.
Okay. He's just as much a techno nihilist. He wants to control the process as much as they do. He wants it packaged and sanitized as much as they do, right? Right. It still is ultimately a revenge against nature.
Right. Yeah. He just prefers the mud to the leather couch.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's exactly. You know what I mean? For whatever reason. And no, you do. He's at a picnic.
I've heard his accent. I have a few speculations. Well,
you know what I mean? He's at a picnic on the back cover of the book. So right. Yeah. And so you get my point. I think where we depart is like our positive vision is not Woodstock.
No, not even my musical tastes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I could go along with some of that stuff, but
Hendrix a little bit. I find him quite overrated, but
Voodoo Child, like that moment in Hendrix, right,
yeah,
kind of like nascent heavy metal,
right? Yeah, it's Voodoo Child with Hendrix. Just real quick, is like a necessary starting point for the many far better covers of that. right?
It's
Like
exactly.
I'm thankful for Hendrix's version,
Yeah.
so we got Paul Gilbert's version and Stevie Ray Vaughan's version.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And it's a step towards Black Sabbath. So
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
exactly.
Good. Agree. Agreement.
Agree. Right. I actually think if you go on the YouTube, the kids like, and you find the Black Sabbath Paris of I think 1969 or 1970 live War Pigs. I think that was the birth moment of heavy metal right there.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, it's hard to deny Sabbath as sort of the founding moment, right?
Exactly.
Of metal. And Sabbath is one of the bands that I can go back and listen to their original stuff. You know, we should do an episode one time of like cover tunes that are better than the originals.
Yeah.
But then originals that are definitely better than cover tunes.
Yeah, everyone has tried to do War Pigs, and
I think Sabbath almost always wins on their two originals being better than the covers. However, I think a good, just real quick, if you'll grant me this one indulgence, what most of the songs Metallica covers, I actually find to be better than the original.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. I know I'm going to look into that. That's cool.
Yeah. All right. Anyways,
so I guess if you ask me, like Jim, how do we de-subliminate sexuality? How do we liberate it? Right? Have a baby.
Yeah, and lots of them.
Yeah,
lots,
have a baby.
Right? Yeah. Hey, be a rebel. Have a big family. Right?
Have a baby. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. No, I mean, how do we obedience to nature?
If you want to return the sexual urge to its its state, right? Family.
Have family, yeah. Have a baby, right? So, like, we can agree with him, like, we should be rebelling against the sexual culture of our day, but not by becoming just a different type of techno-nihilist.
Right.
We should do it by obedience to nature.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Have a baby. And lots of them.
Right, and that's what this is sort of like. We're going to say, I think, as the book unfolds, my critique of Marcuse is to say, he may help us like spot techno-nihilism, right? He kind of gives us, he puts it on our radar, right? But he himself is subject to that same critique.
This is right. Yep, the machine has got him after all.
Yep.
Poor guy. Sad.
Poor guy.
Good, man. That was a fun one. That was a fun one.
It's a good one, man.
Yeah.
And be careful of going on picnics with critical theorists.
Yeah. If you see a scene like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn around.
Yeah. Beware the bucolic setting.
Right. Right. You don't know what you're about to get into, right?
Yeah. It's gonna, as he said here, it's gonna get medieval.
All right, let's take some questions and comments. Gentle listeners, turning over to you now. All right.
I think this is one episode for the ages, man.
This one might be, man. This is the direction of. By the way, I have to announce that the website Philosophy of the People is almost built. Jim still needs to send me his pro photos.
Oh, I know, dude. I keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Right after this, get me to him.
I got a good one of me in a rocking chair doing a beard stroke, reading a book.
Yeah, perfect. Send that. That's the one we need.
Easier the better, right? Yeah.
First comment here comes from Catholic Based. Reminds me of the Twitter. If you read Nazi philosophy referring to Heidegger and Schmidt, you are a Nazi and support 1940s Germany.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, which is to miss much of the point of those guys. Yeah.
Andrew has a quote here. The intent and function of these works, the classics, have thus fundamentally changed. If they once stood in contradiction to the status quo, this contradiction is now flattened out. That is from that paragraph we read, and it's worth highlighting. Absolutely. Yeah. As Adler would tell us in How to Read a Book, highlight, asterisk, underline, all that good stuff.
Beware of carefully tamed classics.
Right. Excellent. Colin says, hey, Pat, off-topic question. Somewhere you wrote an article about the visibility of the church and fittingness of visibility for human beings. What is the title or where can I find it? Thanks. Yeah. I'm not sure. Maybe my Word on Fire one where I have a... if you just Google Pat Flynn Word on Fire, you can look at some of my articles there. If you want a good, very, very good argument for the visible unity of the church, check out Brian Cross's article over A Call to Communion. I'll tell you, when I was evaluating the options, if you will, for Christianity, that was one that that struck me strongly. So check out Brian Cross. I think it's something, if you just search Brian Cross visible unity, maybe so we can find it and put it in there. You connected with Dr. Cross there, Dr. Jim?
I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, how was the convention this weekend?
It was good. Had fun.
Good.
Yeah. Saw some old friends. I think I made a new friend with Matt Rosano. That had a great time talking to him. So it's good. It was a good conference. Yeah.
We'll get him on the podcast here. Marcuse was a prophet. Has a in certain ways, yes.
Yeah.
In certain ways, no doubt. Just like I think we'd say the same about Nietzsche. Brendan says, philosophy of the people merch could have worst comes to worst, my people's comes first. Just saying, not saying it's good. we got a couple good t-shirt ideas here, gentle listeners. So you guys can let us know what you want us to print first. Andrew says, damn, Marcuse is right. Sexuality has been commodified in so many ways. Pornhub, artificial contraception, and Japanese sex robots. Yeah, it's pretty sick stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
QnA Vitae is a good companion on this point. Yeah, it really is. If people have it, even if you're not Catholic, you should definitely read QnA Vitae.
Yeah.
100%. Good. Any final thoughts here, Jim, on anything?
No.
Sorry. When are we going to do the next one? When should people finish their homework of chapter 4?
Yeah, I mean, can there be a freaky Black Friday?
I think there could be.
I mean, I'm not working that day.
Oh yeah, no, for me, absolutely. Yeah, we'll do a freaky Black Friday.
We could do. What is chapter 4 here? What is that?
Maybe we could do a double header on Friday, Marcuse, and then our Freaky Friday, Freaky Black Friday.
Yeah, and then actually that brings us to the end of the first section of the book. Right.
Sweet.
Closing of the universe of discourse.
Perfect. All right, gentle listeners, mark your calendars. The next session we'll do a double header plan for it on Friday. We'll do a Marcuse, and then we'll do our usual Q&A session. So bring whatever good funky stuff you have, and maybe we'll come with a little list of cover tunes that are better than the originals then too. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Hit like, subscribe, gentle listeners. Please do share with both of your friends, and we'll catch you in the next episode.